Russia's cogwheels are no longer turning. The engines that once carried millions of people and goods from the Atlantic to the Pacific are now silent. Russia, once a giant in manufacturing, can no longer deliver anything on time, even within its own borders. Car factories are empty, assembly lines are gathering dust. There are locomotives, but the rails are broken. Trains that need to pass are waiting at the head of sabotaged tracks. Everything is slowing down, everything is stopping. This is not just the collapse of metal or machinery, this is the clogging of the arteries of a huge economy. If the economic arteries are blocked and industry is collapsing, what kind of dead end will Vladimir Putin face next? Russia is a country that spans continents in terms of land area. What holds this vast expanse of 17 million square kilometers together is not just borders, it is railways. These railways, which function like the veins of the country, do not just transport passengers. They keep the economy, the army, industry, and the state moving. Oil and gas exports reach ports via these lines. Coal reaches power plants. Grain reaches remote villages. And ammunition reaches the front lines. Resources extracted from mines deep in Siberia are transported by train to factories around Moscow. A shipment from Vladivostok can even reach the European border thousands of kilometers away. In a country where roads are closed in winter and air travel is a luxury for the public, railways are often the only option. But it is precisely this system that is currently being shaken. In 2023, 66% of ammunition going to the rear and 75% of heavy armored vehicle rotations were on rails. But at the end of 2024, Rojheldor Statistics published a red curve under the heading Cargo Park Time. The average waiting time for wagons was close to 12 hours, compared to less than 5 hours in 2021. Why did the waiting time increase? Firstly, Ukrainian drones regularly strike transport hubs such as Novocherkassk, Lykia, and Bryansk. Rail repairs can be carried out, but each attack also burns sensors and signal cables, forcing trains to be controlled manually, reducing speed limits and increasing stop-start traffic. Secondly, there is a shortage of equipment due to the international embargo on spare parts. German-made wheel bearing rollers, Japanese control relays, Swiss brake systems. Without these, the frequency of overhauls increases and depot line transfers slow down. The stoppage affects not only military shipments but also exports. In the first 7 months of 2025, Russia's rail transport suffered a serious shock. The country's freight volume fell by 6.8%. This is not only a continuation of the 4.1% decline experienced in the previous year, but also evidence of a weakening in the economic system's supporting pillars. Coal shipments decreased by 6.4%, while iron and steel products saw a decline of over 23%. Construction materials experienced a 21% collapse. In 2024, the average speed of freight trains dropped to 35.7 kilometers per hour. This is the lowest level recorded since the 1990s. The implications of these figures for Russia are dire. When raw materials fail to arrive on time, factory production grinds to a halt. This slowdown drives up costs, while consumers at the other end of the chain struggle to access fewer products at higher prices. In some regions, especially in 2024, there were delays of weeks in construction materials and basic food products. Small businesses are trying to shoulder the burden of rising transportation costs, while even large chains are reviewing their stocking policies against supply risks. But the real problem is the lack of alternatives. Western sanctions have greatly reduced sea routes, making Russia even more dependent on railways. Coal and grain, which used to be transported to ports by ship, are now piling up in rows of wagons. But these wagons are already full, and the rails are already worn out. The infrastructure of the system still relies on its Soviet legacy. Rails, bridges, and signaling systems that have not received proper maintenance for decades cannot handle the increased load. Critical investments have either been postponed or cut due to budget constraints. The result: chain delays, stranded cargo, and clogged logistics routes. Siberian coal is turning into piles before it reaches the ports. Some exporters have been forced to turn to more complicated and costly alternative routes via Belarus and Kazakhstan. But these routes both extend the distance and increase bureaucratic delays. Cement factories are suspending production due to fuel and raw material shortages. Metallurgical plants are missing contract deliveries. Food producers in the Far East are imposing capacity restrictions because they cannot transport packaging materials and energy. Grain silos across the country are overflowing, and flour and pasta prices are rising on supermarket shelves. Moreover, this pressure is not only economic, but also physical. Rails are wearing out from excessive loads, brake systems are malfunctioning, and breakdowns are accumulating rapidly due to difficulties in accessing spare parts. The numerous derailments, fires, and collisions in 2024 were concrete consequences of this collapse. With Western export restrictions cutting off access to German and Japanese parts that are vital for the railways, Russia is now struggling to find not only rail cars, but also solutions. The second major sector is automotive. Avtovaz in Tolyatti, the former Nissan plant in St. Petersburg, and Volkswagen's lines in Kaluga. In 2022, following the departure of Western partners, the Kremlin said that parts substitution will be completed in 6 months. 2 years later, the Rostat production index is 40% behind. Old Lada models have been brought back onto the production line, but most of the modern airbags, ABS, and Euro 6 engine standards come from the Chinese supply chain. This means dependence on the ruble-yuan exchange rate and cash flow problems. Due to cash shortages, Avtovaz workers are being forced to take leave. As consumer demand falls, fringe benefits such as childcare services and company health clinics have been suspended, and social satisfaction surveys have hit rock bottom. This is a fracture that goes beyond the automotive industry and touches on public psychology. The picture is not encouraging on the military supply side either. In Uralvagonzavod's first quarter report for 2025, the production target for T-90M tank hulls remained at 72%. They cannot source the steel product externally, and domestic production requires a vacuum melting furnace to achieve the same hardness-toughness balance. The furnace's graphite electrode is stuck in the Italian supply chain. When the electrode leaks, furnace regeneration takes longer and the main line drops to minimum operating speed. The result: delays in the production of tank hulls, artillery wedges, and pallet steel. While total tank output is falling, even spare parts cannot be delivered to frontline repair workshops. The Kremlin is trying to fill this gap with the rhetoric of Eurasian alternative exports. But foreign trade data paints a picture of one-sided dependence on China. According to customs reports, imports of electronic components from China in the first half of this year appear to have increased by 58% compared to 2024. Among these are dual-use FPGA chips that can be adapted for civilian and military use. However, Chinese manufacturers are demanding a 30% advance payment to counter the ruble's fluctuations. As the foreign exchange shortage grows, securing advance payments becomes more difficult, and shipments slow down. The front line feels where the chain is broken. Phase switch modules needed to repair S400 batteries are arriving late, and battery backups are waiting in reserve. Ukraine's drone attacks are hitting that gap. Returning to the car market, foreign brands' hybrid vehicles are almost non-existent. A Shanghai-made SUV model cost 2.3 million rubles last year, but this year the price rose to 3.8 million because of the yuan exchange rate and increased logistics insurance costs. Russian consumers say, "The costs are high, let's wait." This wait is inflating Avtovaz's inventory. The company is forced to launch a campaign, profit margins are falling, and the R&D budget is being cut. From here, a bridge to the defense sector. Part of the project financing for Uralvagonzavod's armored KMAZ platform was indirectly subsidized from Avtovaz's profits. As profits shrink, Vagonzavod is forced to seek internal resources. The central bank's interest rates are high and credit costs are heavy. In other words, the civilian automotive downturn is having a ripple effect on the military truck project. This industrial collapse is hitting the Russian people's wallets with inflation and their backs with unemployment fears, while the railway and automotive crises are also affecting the front lines. After all, another item as important as artillery shells in the Ukraine war is the truck wagon rhythm. Severstal's Cherepovets steel cannot find wagons to transport iron ore from the Ural mines to the Luhansk internal lines, causing delays in the production of armor plates for field repair units. With no injection system available for diesel locomotive engines, convoys with reduced horsepower are arriving at the front instead of air-conditioned ammunition trains. The complaint frequently voiced in Russian defense blogs that ammunition is left at the station like stray mines while waiting for wagons actually sums up the logistical gridlock. The Kremlin tried to break this spiral with foreign currency injections. The $11.5 billion withdrawn from the National Wealth Fund for an industrial stimulus package was transferred to the Railway Industry Association and the Automotive Industry Development Fund at the end of July. But in return for the money, the machinery, software, chips and bearings are still not coming. Washington's sanctions package, which included the addition of Chinese-made but Western-licensed ERP software to the embargo list, paralyzed the digital supply systems of Russian factories. Some companies shut down their wireless networks for security reasons, switching to Excel spreadsheets to track orders. This return to the past is not out of nostalgia for Soviet-style planning, but simply because of the idea that we should track orders with as few documents as possible. However, modern automotive production lines depend on digital coding for on-time delivery. Even if the Excel spreadsheet is complete, if the truck body bolts are waiting in a Chinese warehouse for a renewed customs declaration, the assembly line still comes to a halt. A side effect of the economic turmoil is the rising premiums for international shipping insurance. Any container ship calling at a Russian port on the Baltic route doubles its insurance premium if it carries sensitive electronic cargo, because the policy includes a secondary sanctions risk. This cost is passed on to the part price at a rate of 15 to 20%. Additionally, containers entering Baltic ports face an extra half-day of customs checks. The digital declaration system remains closed in sanctions mode. As a result, Chinese-made ECUs are both expensive and delayed. When time-sensitive machinery sits idle, hourly depreciation costs skyrocket, fueling a second wave of ruble inflation. As the domestic market shrinks, the Kremlin's return to exports tactic is not working. The Western market is closed, China and India are producing their own cars and wagons, and selling vehicles to Africa with ruble loans sounds good, but goods cannot be shipped without insurance and shipping documents. The journey to Nigeria takes 45 days with local currency fluctuations and customs duties as high as freight costs upon arrival. While the Russian trade attaché says, "We will sell laders to Africa," workers at the assembly line are sent home without even changing their tools. On the other side of the coin is brain drain. More than 500,000 young professionals, especially those working in engineering, IT and technical fields, have left the country. These are the people who could repair the collapsed transportation infrastructure and revive the railway and automotive sectors. But now, most of them are building new lives for themselves in a software office in Istanbul or by starting a startup in Tbilisi. The situation is even more alarming for those who remain in the country. Critical professions such as railway maintenance technician, welder, or automotive engineer are no longer economically or socially appealing to young people. Vocational high schools that were once bustling are now struggling with empty classrooms. Insufficient resources are hindering quality education. Some schools have closed down completely. Moreover, the current workforce is aging rapidly. As experienced craftsmen retire from these fields that young people are not interested in, there is no one to replace them. Wages have remained stagnant for years, working conditions are harsh, and the future is uncertain. The result, Russia is struggling to find the hands to repair its infrastructure, due to both the human capital lost through brain drain and the aging and shrinking workforce at home. Every corridor that closes is a step toward destruction. Putin risked the railways for war dividends. Now, the walls of the labyrinth are closing in. While Western analysts focus on tank numbers and troop positions, Siberian rails are rusting. Could Sun Tzu have predicted the war without mapping supply lines? Strategic planners must monitor rail widths with the same precision as missile silos. A state that cannot protect its rails loses its sovereignty. If Moscow's eastern flank collapses from a lack of supplies, will NATO's Black Sea fleets matter? When Belarus backs down, Polish rails swallow up a third of Russian exports, forcing Russia to launch ferry services in the Baltic Sea. When we put all the pieces together, a single picture emerges. The disruption in Russia's military-civilian industrial complex has now transformed into a unified crisis area, affecting not only new weapons production, but also domestic consumption, regional employment, and the foreign exchange balance. Railway congestion is slowing down the flow of ammunition to the front lines, as well as export revenues. The slowdown in the automotive sector is reducing civilian demand and depriving the military-industrial complex of funding. High interest rates are making borrowing expensive for both companies and households. Social discontent is growing, and the skilled young population is fleeing. In the short term, the Kremlin will attempt to keep the system afloat through new tax deferrals, mandatory domestic borrowing, and Chinese loans. But if the logistical bottlenecks and technology embargo are not resolved, the recession could be felt as a cumulative GDP decline of more than 5% in 2026. This would significantly reduce the defense budget in real terms and make the financial sustainability of the war questionable. No matter how long Russian decision-makers delay the domestic consumption defense spending trade-off, the rust on the rails, the halt in production, and the value of the ruble will ultimately lead to the same outcome. Without sustainable supply at the front, it is impossible to maintain strategic initiative. Current data indicates that we are rapidly approaching that critical threshold. Thank you for watching.